Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is not Alan Saunders. We got a special Faribault Friday. Why I say it's special, it's my man's birthday at the time of recording this. Nick, thank you for joining me, especially on your birthday, and happy birthday.
Yeah, man. Thanks for wishing me happy birthday. Indeed, I am celebrating as well. It's a good day. Um, Steelers won last night, obviously, and
Hmm.
you come out here and get to spend it with Smitty in the afternoon. It's all great, man. Faribault Friday time, man.
Yeah.
Come on, baby.
Nick, how old are you?
23.
23 today. Wow. Okay.
Am
All
I
right.
aging you, Smitty?
Huh?
Am I aging you?
Yeah, because I can remember when I was 23 5 years ago, and I'm like, man, I would give anything to be 5 years younger right now, and my knees be 5 years younger, and my ankles be 5 years younger, and my entire body be 5 years younger. But we can't have that luxury, so enjoy it while you can. And then everybody that's older than me is like, is this guy really complaining about being 28 right now? Wait till you get to be 40. Uh,
Dude.
Nick, I thought we were going to have only good stuff to talk about today, but we do have a good bit of good stuff to talk about, which is why I want to start off with today, fresh, most recently, what we have to talk about, which is George Pickens basically scrubbing his Instagram of anything Steelers related. Put out a post. The first story was actually deleted, which has since been deleted. Said "free me," and it's like the post itself is kind of like this guy losing his mind, the character losing his mind. It says "free me" at the bottom of it. He unfollowed at least Mike Tomlin and Kenny Pickett. I'm not sure who else he was following prior to that he doesn't now. But the only players on the offensive side of the ball in the Steelers that he does follow now, and yes, I feel very stupid even mentioning this stuff, is Broderick Jones, goes back to their Georgia days, obviously, and Mason Rudolph, oddly enough, are the only two players on the offensive side of the football that he follows. We've seen things like this before where a guy scrubs his Instagram, obviously very frustrated with his situation. The body language was not good last night. Even after Deontay Johnson scores his first touchdown in 660 days or whatever it was. Nick, what do we make of this? And is this something that could linger over, as time progresses, or do you think that the Steelers are going to be able to kind of put a lid on this situation?
I always hate talking about these Instagram things because it
I
can be
get, yeah.
something, it can be nothing. I,
Hmm.
I think with GP, it's tough to read because this is a guy that's so emotional. Like he is an emotional person. He's an emotional football player. Like he wears those emotions very proudly on his sleeve. We've seen that work in his favor. We've seen that obviously work not in his favor. We've seen him blow up on the sidelines where Deontay Johnson has to calm him down, whoever has to calm him down. We've seen this time and time again. When things don't go well, he just gets really frustrated. I think that's part of how he just expresses his frustration and expresses his emotions. Now, I will say this. I think we are talking about as an issue here his ability to deal with said emotions publicly, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah. Yeah.
way to go about frustration as an NFL football player. The way to do it, especially if you're like not trying to do like a master strategic game, right? Like, okay, if you're Devontae Adams, for example, who was really frustrated with what was going on in Las Vegas, and you were like, all right, I probably like there's an end game to that, right? It's either okay, these guys are gone or I'm gone, basically. Like that's an end game. I'm not sure there's an end game to this GP stuff. Like I don't think he's like gonna go request a trade to Omar Khan tomorrow and say trade me in the offseason. Like I just think he's really frustrated with how the last two games have gone for him. Because he hasn't had big numbers, right? Since Deontay
Mhm.
came back, Deontay's been the featured receiver because Pickens is getting all the double teams. He's doing the dirty work basically, while Deontay is getting the stats. That's kind of
Mhm.
what's happening. And now he should have had two touchdowns, right? He should have had the touchdown against the Jaguars obviously happened, but should have had it against the Titans too if he didn't just make that massive gallop to the sideline and should have been a touchdown. But I think what you're kind of seeing here is his frustrations in not being able to get high volume targets while Deontay is getting high volume targets. He absolutely embodies a receiver that obviously wants the football. Like he wants the football. He's an alpha dog that wants the football. Deontay's the same way, but I think Deontay goes about expressing his frustrations in a more professional manner. And I think
Mhm.
even young Deontay had some of these flare ups on social media at times where he would make some things, and you'd be like, okay, what's going on here with Deontay Johnson? Like, I'll say this: I don't think this is Antonio Brown. I've seen people saying he's doing like an AB speed run. I don't feel like it's an Antonio
Speed run.
situation. Um, I feel like we're just talking about a really emotional football player that has to
Yeah.
learn how to deal with said emotions of frustrating stretches. You're going to have those as a
Mhm.
football player in the National Football League, even if Pickens is as good as he is. And really, I mean, let's talk about it. He only has himself to blame for the fact he doesn't have a touchdown yesterday. Like,
Yeah.
that's a
Yep.
touchdown, man. He put it right where you want him. I understand some other plays, right? Like the drag, the cross route where he probably would have had 35 yards and Kenny just airmails it over his face. Like, I
Mhm.
understand that, but you can't do it publicly unless you and your agent are like, all right, man, we're trying to get out of here. Like, and I don't know, maybe that's what they're trying to do. Maybe George has come to the conclusion he doesn't want to be here anymore. But I don't think that's what's happening here. I think it's just an emotional guy. Based on the history I know of George, this is
Yeah.
an emotional guy that is just having an emotional few days here because he's struggling on the field. And it is what it is. I think ideally you would want your wide receiver to be very happy with the fact that his other teammate scored a touchdown and be happy that his team won. But
Mhm.
some a lot of wide receivers, like, this isn't a George Pickens specific thing. A lot of wide receivers think
Sure.
this
Yeah.
way. How many times has Stephon Diggs like blown up in the Bills locker room, right? And all this stuff. Like, how many times does that come up? And he's still there. So
Yeah.
I don't. This isn't necessarily doom and gloom. I think it's something that Mike Tomlin has to address with him and say, listen, this is how we have to go about this. But until we hear like, he requests a formal trade or this, and this, like, I don't think it's a huge deal.
Sure, and I'm in the same boat. I want to see the situation play out more. It's just a little bit frustrating that we can't just have a normal victory Friday as a fan base without having this little wrench thrown into it. And to your point, this isn't at all an isolated incident in terms of wide receivers around the NFL, and a lot of the times these things do get worked out. I think that was a great example with Stephon Diggs, but I think why Steelers fans maybe have a little bit of like PTSD when it comes to the issue is because of how the Antonio Brown situation obviously ended up playing out and how that dragged on and everything like that. And again, not calling the San Antonio Brown situation, but just saying that thought is in people's heads, I think, anytime that a wide receiver acts in a certain way for this fan base. So I think that is the thought that the general fan base will have, but not myself, at least not in this present time.
Well, listen, I don't think they're wrong in that. We've seen social media with Steelers receivers be an issue in the past, whether
Hmm.
that is AB or Chase Claypool or I don't think it was a big issue, but obviously people took issue with what Juju did on TikTok.
Yeah.
But
Well,
like,
even you mentioned Deontay earlier. He scrubbed his Instagram before he got his
yeah,
extension, before
he
camp a
did.
couple years ago.
Right? And
Yeah.
everyone thought, okay, he's gone. Like,
Yeah.
he obviously that didn't come to fruition. Like,
Hmm.
it's a different thing. And Pickens is still very young as well. He's learning how to handle himself as a pro. Like, listen, man, it's hard to get guys that wear their emotions on their sleeves like this to pull back. Like, they do that. Stephon Diggs does that. Like, that's
Hmm.
who he is, right? If you are, and sometimes it leads to inevitable breaks. Diggs ended up getting traded from the Vikings for that reason. Another guy who always wore his heart on his sleeve is Ocho Cinco. He's a guy that always had,
Yeah.
these outbreaks. Obviously, no social media during like the prime of his career in terms of like what it is now. So that never really came up, but he was frustrated. Terrell Owens obviously is the prime example of that. But it happens. Like, receivers, you just got to accept that. Like, there's a receiver archetype that has diva too. Like, it just happens. There
Hmm.
are very few star receivers that don't have a diva gene in them. Like, very few. Like, can you think of Cooper Cup? Maybe, I think, is one.
Oh, you
Like,
mean playing right
yeah,
now? Because
just
I
like
was gonna say,
playing
like,
like
yeah,
Cooper Cup.
yeah,
Like, even like top receivers, man, want to go where they're featured and where they play well. Tyreek Hill
mhm,
wanted that. Devontae Adams wanted that. All these guys, Stephon Diggs wanted that. All these guys want that. Like, George Pickens wants to be featured like an alpha dog wide receiver because he's really good at football. Like, it makes sense. Like, he does make the offense better. It would be different if he was a guy that was just like, I'm not getting targets and he's not that good. Like, he's really good. But last night ain't the is not the kind of example you want to use of that, man. He cost himself a touchdown. Like, that wasn't on him. Like, that wasn't on Kenny Pickett. Like, that was on you, dude. Like, you gotta drag that toe. But like, he's gotta learn how to handle these emotions better. I think that's just the biggest thing is you
Mhm.
gotta learn how to handle these emotions better. And for the Steelers, it's not, like some thing where they're like, we got to move this guy. But it's something where Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin see it and they're like, dude, again, like, come on. Like, I'm sure they've had this talk with him before where they're like, here's how you handle your emotions. You don't, it seems like he's like gone away from the blow up on the sideline stuff. Like last year when he came off the field against Atlanta, right? He was just
Mhm.
teeing off. Like he was going crazy. And now I think, in this game, he just looked kind of I mean, the picture of Deontay celebrating and him just sitting on the bench where he just looks like dead, dude. Like
Mhm.
he's like, "This sucks." Is a little different, right? That's a little different, but you can't go to social media and do this either. Like you I understand you're trying to send a message, but you don't send free me out to the public. You know what you do in that case? You text Matt Canada, you text Kenny Pickett, you text these guys and you say, dude, we got to find ways to give me the football. Like that's how you do it. And there, again, as I said, there's going to be diva gene usually in a lot of these receivers. It happens. Like there are very few receivers that aren't going to want the football at that high clip. It's just not going to happen. But Pickens has to go about it better. He has to understand how to be professional about asking for those targets, about expressing those frustrations. Deontay Johnson hadn't scored a touchdown in 2 years. You don't think that guy was frustrated? Like I'm telling you, he was. But
Yeah, yeah,
he wasn't going to social media. And Deontay obviously probably learned from his mass mistakes too as a young player.
yeah. I agree, and I I think we've spent, enough time on this. I'll be curious as to what people think in the comments, so let us know how you're feeling about this situation, but again, I think it's worth monitoring, but I'm not overly concerned about this, at this present time. Let's start talking about this game, though, Nick, between the Steelers and Titans. The Steelers come out with a W last night, Thursday Night Football against the Titans, and, you know what? I think we gotta start off with the topic, Broderick Jones starting at right tackle like we thought was going to happen. They talked about it on 93.7 The Fan. Nick, you got to add into your article, first reported by Steelers Now, Zachary Smith. Really cool stuff. But to see Broderick out there, how did you feel like he looked at right tackle? Like, did you feel like he looked out of place, or what was your evaluation of him at right tackle?
I thought he played well, man, and that's at his not at his natural position, which I
Right.
thought was very impressive. So I thought he played very well. I thought he really ignited the run game. I thought that's where he really kind of came about. He didn't like stick on blocks a lot, but he got a hat just for a second that allowed Najee Harris and Jalen Warren to break it. He was getting to
Hmm.
the second level, had good technique. I think in the past game, he still showed a little bit of inconsistencies. I still think his footwork and hand usage has to improve because I felt like there were a few plays where Landry kind of got him leaning a little bit. But Broderick is such a good athlete that he just recovered. Like there's some reps on his tape where it is like technical mess, but dude, the guy's athleticism is so insane he can just recover. And then there
Hmm.
were other reps where I think you saw him put it all together. And he just looked awesome. Like I never really thought Landry was ever in danger of getting to Kenny all night. Like I thought that was pretty good. I thought he was really solid in pass pro as a result of that. And Landry's not like this twitched up edge rusher, so it makes sense that Broderick would be good against that type of guy. But I think when you saw him against the Texans, for example, Grenard is pretty good athlete and was able to kind of get in on his a little bit, beat him inside a little bit. But then when the Ravens game came, he kind of understood where how to set things. I thought his growths in picking up stunts has been awesome. Like he was
Hmm.
terrible against the Texans when he did that. Then the Ravens, who throw so many different looks at you, he looked awesome in that game. And I thought he looked great in this game doing that as well. I think he has really improved. I think that's the biggest thing. Like coaching on this team overall, I think you can question, but the rookies have come along very nicely. These
Yeah.
young guys are learning. Like Broderick has learned from his mistakes. Joey's learned from his mistake. Benton has learned from his mistakes. Darnell Washington plays 10 snaps against the Jaguars, gets more snaps this game, comes back and plays a really good football game. Like, I think it's a good thing to
Yeah.
see your rookies learning from their mistakes and not making the same thing twice. I think that's like a a really important indicator of how your young guys are being coached. And
Mhm.
I think right now, what you see is the young guys are being coached quite well. And so Broderick is a prime example of that. And I really liked what I saw from him. Only allowed one pressure, and that backs it up. So he's playing at a high level, man. I thought it looked great, and there should be no reason this guy. I don't care if it's at right tackle or left tackle. There's zero
Yeah.
reason this guy should not be starting going forward. He's their best tackle right
Absolutely. I want to ask you that because this kind of goes to the coaching point too. I put this on X. Alan and I talked about it before. I believe Tyler and I talked about it around the 4-1-2, but I think I brought it up so many times. Forget who I've talked about it with, but I don't know if I got your take on this. Um, how much do I think that we were all in the camp that, like, Joey Porter Jr. should have been playing earlier. We wanted Broderick on the field earlier. Keanu Benton, I think, has seen a slight increase in the amount of snaps he was playing earlier as well. But like, how much do you think that the slow process in their development has like played into the fact they're getting such good results early? Like, what's that balance there, between throwing them to the fire, maybe not getting good results, and then like them not being in the right headspace and being down, as opposed to knowing when they are ready in situation and putting them into the best possible situations when you feel like they are.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think first of all, the Jones and Porter stuff was exacerbated by how bad the vets
Yep.
were.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
think Benton was as exacerbated because
Hmm.
Adams and Ogunjobi and Watts and Loudermilk and Leal have all played well. Like, I think so. It's been easier to swallow the Keanu Benton stuff because Benton is still, getting 30, 40 snaps a game. Like,
Yeah.
he, like
Hmm.
I think when he got like 19 against the Jags, it was like, okay, what are you doing? But like, okay, he's third in the rotation. Like, yeah, you might want to get less for Larry, but like, it
Yeah.
makes sense why like Keanu is not getting all these
Yeah. I
snaps.
don't think there's really been anything egregious on a week to week basis
Yeah,
in
I
terms
think
of
the
his
Jaguars
snap.
game was the only one
Yeah.
where I was like, "Okay, dude, he played like 17 snaps or something, or maybe that like I was like, what are we doing? Like
Yeah.
that's got to change." But I mean, once Adams goes out in this game, we're talking about a guy that comes in and plays 48 snaps. Like that's a lot of
Hmm.
snaps. He played more than
Might
Cam.
be might be more snaps than he's ever played at Wisconsin.
I think he's played more than that at Wisconsin.
Really?
He was
Okay.
notorious for playing all game at Wisconsin. Like that's one of his things. So he was able to do this. Larry playing 50 snaps. I understand with Mon down that would naturally happen, but would still like to see Larry play a little less. And that's not because Larry isn't good. I just think he's a really um streaky player. So I think the less you get of him in terms of like give him like 35, 40 rather like 55, like that's a lot for Larry. I'd like to see him 35, 40 be a little fresher, and I feel like you could get more pop from Larry. So I think betting at like 45 sounds about right to me. Cam will obviously naturally rise up to the top when he is back. But
Hmm.
but I just feel like they have done a nice job of not throwing them to the wolves, but I do think they have been a little too slow on some of them. Like, I think Broderick right out of the bye week should have been the starting left tackle. Like, there was really zero reason to put Dan Moore back in there. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? Okay, you don't
Hmm.
want to start him against Max Crosby, Miles Garrett, and Nick Bosa. Like, cool, I get that. You don't want to throw him against elite edge rushers right away. He kind of struggles against the Texans, but then he has this like great game against the Ravens, and you're like, dude, that's better than any game Dan Moore's ever played. Like, let's see what this guy can do. And it wasn't like he was facing like some great edge rusher against the Rams. I like Byron Young, but like, dude, that's a guy he's faced in college. Like, he should be able to handle him. Josh Allen would have been a nice challenge, but like again, someone that is a rookie, you're going to learn from playing, and so it never made much sense to me why that didn't happen. I think the Joey one makes sense, and here's what I'll tell people because have they paid attention to what's gone on in Washington? Emmanuel Forbes came in and
Yep.
started week one, and he was so bad they benched him because he just lost all of his confidence. I think that was a big thing with them is Joey, and I think the Travis Etienne touchdown showed it a little bit where maybe Joey didn't know all the zone coverage matches, all these intricate coverages that the Steelers run just quite yet because that was a bust on Joey. I think and I know that's a bust on Joey because I talked to KZ and Joey, and they both said it was man to man to that side. I know it looks like cover two. KZ said they were disguising cover two. So if you take that by the word that was on Joey, I think it was too. Derek also agreed that it was probably on Joey, and that they was doing a check there. But I just think Peterson and Wallace were so bad. at some point that after the Ravens game, it was like, dude, like, what are you doing not playing this guy more? Like, they should have been playing him more against the Texans. Like, he was getting like he started off with 7 snaps and like 10 snaps, which I
Mhm,
understand is kind of a game flow thing because they weren't doing all these dime packages looks and they weren't putting out a 3 corner nickel very often, as often their 3 safety nickel. But I mean, come on, dude. Like at some point, I feel like Peterson and Wallace were killing the team so much that it was like, you got to play the guy. Like, and I feel like they finally kind of caught on, but it even felt like it was a little late against the Rams, right? Where he only played 40% of the snaps in that game, I believe. Um, Finally got the starting job against the Jags, but like he got in over, like Puka was going off the whole first half in that game
mhm.
because Wallace and Peterson were getting toasted. Like if Joey's in there the whole time, you got to wonder how much Puka does. So I just feel like they were a little slow. I think there was a balancing act. I think they were right to bring them along, and I know people said, "Oh, they should have been starting from day one." Like I understand why some of these guys weren't starting from day one, but I do think they absolutely brought them along too slowly, and they've made some really dumb kind of backtracks in areas with Darnell only playing 10 snaps, getting outsnapped by Rodney Williams. Um, you know,
Mhm.
Jones not starting. Like they've taken some weird backtracks through it too. So I understand, there's that fine line, but I think that their handling of the rookies both deserves praise because yes, you don't want to throw them in there completely before they're comfortable, but also, brother, when your vets are playing as badly as these guys have, when Dan Moore's getting smoked every week, and Wallace and Peterson are arguably the worst corner duo in the NFL, like some point you got to let them rip, and I think that in particular has earned them scorn. And I think their handling of Darnell Washington still doesn't make much sense. Let the guy catch the football once. He caught the ball once. He's
Mhm.
had one target over the past like 4 games. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be good. But like, dude, what's the harm in trying him? Like, what's the harm in trying? Like, I don't get that. So I like parts of it. Other parts I just think are too conservative with some of what they're doing.
What did you make of, Joey Porter's performance yesterday specifically? Saw a lot of DeAndre Hopkins, obviously. That's where most of his work came, but what did you think about his game?
Yeah, I think when you look at what Joey did, good and bad. I think we saw the good and the bad of the guy. Great coverage skills, man. This guy has all of the length you would want. He's a sticky coverage corner. He's fluid. He can play in man, off man. Like he's a fun player to watch, and guys really don't know how to kind of stickle against that. Now he'll have
Mhm.
some footwork inconsistencies that get him, but really, when we talk about what his issues are, right? The grabbiness, that's something that definitely showed up. I think this was really the first time in his career where we really saw his college grabbiness show up. Got hit with a few of those illegal contact holding calls. I think the last one was a complete phantom call. I don't know what that
I agree, yeah.
but, like, I saw there
I
were
didn't
a
like it.
few on tape when you go back and watch, like, that could have been called, so, I would like to see him clean that up because I think his hands are good enough to just work that way, and I feel like his hips are fluid enough where he doesn't have to grab those guys out of the break. I think his tackling is obviously the biggest area. I mean,
Yeah.
dude, it's not that and I've seen people saying, "Oh, he's not strong enough." Like, I don't think it's that he's not strong enough. I think he is strong enough, and because otherwise he wouldn't be able to jam guys off the line like he does. Like he stuns guys in press. He's got enough punch. His technique is so bad. Like it is not that he's not willing. He just drops his eyes. Like he goes down like this, where you just see the top of his head and his eyes are right into the turf. Like, how are you going to tackle anybody not looking at him? Like, it's just impossible. And so he's got to stop dropping his head. He's wrapping them up. Like, you'll see him literally go like this to guys, but his head will be down and he'll just get rocked back because he's off balance because he's over. Basically, when you drop your head, you lose your center of gravity, right? You lose the ability to play through the strength of your lower body. So even if he wraps guys up, it's all due to his upper body that he will bring them down. He's got to stop dropping his head. That's the biggest thing that he's doing right now. He's got to go through with his eyes. And so that to me is the biggest issue right now is man, you got to wrap guys up. And so we'll see what happens. But that's the biggest area of growth. Overall, though, very promising play.
Yeah,
I mean, listen, I don't care. Anytime DeAndre Hopkins isn't like the elite DeAndre Hopkins anymore, but he's a good player,
sure.
as you saw against the Falcons. He's still a good player, man. He shut him down, and this isn't the first guy shut down. He shut down Calvin Ridley too. So I think we still need a larger sample size because cornerback play is very volatile and very
Hmm.
very staticky week to week. But I'm very excited to see him get some of these tests over the next few weeks. Specifically, not the Packers, but Amari Cooper, Jamar Chase, these guys that are going to be coming
Yeah.
up on that schedule. Like, I'm really excited to see those matchups because we've seen him go toe to toe with Devontae Adams for a little bit, but we haven't seen him play like that upper echelon guy yet. And he won't get that till he sees Jamar. And so I'm interested to see what he does against him.
Yeah, that's like if we hadn't played the Raiders yet and they were on the schedule now, we would probably see Joey against him a lot more than we did earlier in the season. So, but yeah, I'm very encouraged just because I thought he would take a lot more lumps than what I've seen. Granted, like obviously the tackling stuff is an issue, and we both believe that that's more of a technique thing than a willingness to do so. So I think that that can definitely be worked on. But you mentioned the footwork, which to me was a big like everybody was talking about his ball skills coming out right, but like he was around the ball. He had a ton of pass deflections. It was just a matter of converting those into turnovers. So I wasn't necessarily concerned with that. It was more the footwork for me. I think it's popped up at times, but I don't think he's gotten burnt because of it yet. And I just think that like he's been a lot better than I expected him to be in coverage up to this point.
He's cleaned it up. Grady Brown
Yeah.
deserves a ton of credit for this. He has cleaned up his footwork, his press techniques better. I feel like his grabbiness, although it was a problem in this game, was much better throughout the year. Like I didn't really see him grab against Ridley much, and Ridley's a better route runner. I just feel like he is a guy that has grown so much. And so even though I harped on those negatives where I said, okay, he's a little grabby, he's got to do this tackling stuff, like do not
Hmm.
get it twisted, folks. Like this guy's having an awesome rookie year right now, and it's so promising to see a rookie corner play at this level because really you could argue he's been the best rookie corner. I mean, it's him or Witherspoon, like one of the two.
Yeah.
Witherspoon's having a great
Yeah.
year in Seattle, but
He's been
like,
awesome. And
dude,
Gonzalez was before he got hurt. Very
he
small sample
was.
size for
I mean,
him
that
though.
that
Yeah.
rookie class looks as good as what we thought it was going to be, and I thought Porter has just played so good through these first few starts, man. And it's again, it's not like he's faced scrubs. Like we're not talking about, you know, a random guy off the street here that's going to be a mechanic in 2 months. Like we're talking about Calvin Ridley. We're talking about Devondre Hopkins. Like these are big name receivers that are still very good receivers. And again, I'm not sure, Calvin Ridley is like prime route running Calvin Ridley after his years off. I'm not sure Nuke is what he was in Houston or what he was at the beginning of his time in Arizona, but they've pretty much proven this year they're pretty solid players still, man, and they can do
Hmm.
whatever they want against top
Yeah.
corners still. I mean, AJ Terrell got absolutely toasted last week by DeAndre Hopkins, and I think most people would agree AJ Terrell's a top 10 corner in the league.
Hmm.
So yeah, he can still do it, and Porter shut him down. I mean, that second half performance was just a masterclass by Joey. I mean, no catches, man, none, because he shouted him basically the whole time. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of fortitude to go up to a coach on a short week and say, Mike Tomlin, nonetheless, and say, I want 10. When this guy, DeAndre Hopkins, is one of the best wide receivers of the past decade in football, probably is going to get a bust in Canton someday.
Hmm.
And you're like, I'm just going to go cover this guy. And he does. Like, it would be one thing if you just say that and then you're like, you get toasted and they go away from it. Dude, the more he did it, the more he just shut him down. It was incredible.
Hmm.
It's incredible to see a rookie do that. And I think Steelers fans should be very, very, very impressed because you can teach people how to tackle. You can teach people how to tackle. I can't tell you that enough. You can teach them how to tackle. It's hard to teach coverage skills, man.
Yeah.
You can't teach the length. You can't teach the length. It's his one unique trait.
Yep. Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about something unfortunate that happened in the game too was the loss of Cole Holcomb in the inside linebacker room, going to be done for the season. Those guys, Alan and I just talked about it this past week, how those guys were really coming into their own. Seemed like they found a nice blend in terms of how to use all of him, Quan Alexander, Annie Landon Roberts, and they were finding a nice mesh of the utilization of those three. Now Holcomb's out of the equation. Nick, how do you think that the Steelers inside linebacker room fills that void that's going to be left by Cole Holcomb's absence?
It's really hard because I think that he has played at such a solid level for them. He's also their communication hub, which I think is
Right.
even worse, right? They lose their two communication hubs because people were like, "Oh, Darius Rush is on and blows the coverage." And I was like, "Guys, I'm not surprised. Minka and Cole Holcomb are out, and
Hmm.
kind of is what it is." But it's hard to replace Cole because there's not a natural guy to replace him on the roster. And Mark Robinson will probably step up in that, but like he is not the same skill set as Cole, right? Mark Robb is an athletic player that's more of a run stopper, has questions in coverage, has questions about his processing right now. And I really like Quan and Landon. I'm worried they're going to get a little overexposed. I thought what was great about Cole Holcomb, Kwon Alexander, Landon Roberts as a rotation is that none of these guys are elite linebackers. They're solid linebackers that have strengths, but they have clear weaknesses. And I thought they really worked off one another. I'm not sure they have that same dynamic if you put Robinson in that. I feel like
Hmm.
you have a pretty easy identifiable coverage weakness if Roberts is going to be playing a lot more. So maybe more sub package football. So maybe what you do is you get a little bit fancy here, and maybe when Minka comes back, you start putting Keanu Neal down there a little bit more,
Hmm.
and you
Yep.
start playing him there. Maybe you go out and maybe you do sign a linebacker. I don't know. It's not a great like linebacking group like there's like Anthony Barr, and it's not great. I'll say that. Maybe they get like Nick Kwiatkowski back, but I really
Hmm.
look at them and say, how do you minimize the weaknesses? Because like we know what a Landon Roberts is. Like he's an awesome run thumping guy. He's great blitzer, fantastic run defender. But they haven't forced him to be in coverage a lot this year. And it's been the right call because that's not what he is, right? And so they've really done a nice job of playing to his strengths. I just don't think they need to get Roberts in coverage situations. I think against teams like the Browns where they go heavy, right? Where they go 12, 13 personnel and spread you out. I'm worried against those teams because they can run and condense you in base. But what happens if Roberts is split out against, well, DeAndre Hopkins was on Cole Holcomb when he got hurt. What if Landon
Yeah.
Roberts is on Amari Cooper? Like, what, even if he's on David Njoku, like, that is an issue. Like, he is not a good coverage linebacker. And E Rob will tell you, as much as he tries, like, it's not a strength of his game. Like he
Yeah.
tries, and I think he competes very hard in coverage, but is not his strength. Quan, I think, has actually been a really good coverage linebacker this year, and that should be probably your dime linebacker, or maybe he's your dime backer. Maybe they like what they saw to Darius Rush. I thought Rush played pretty well actually down the
Yeah.
stretch.
He had to play 40 snaps.
Yeah, he played a lot of snaps, and the more he played, I thought the more comfortable he looked. So maybe you move Keanu into the dime linebacker role so you can keep playing Darius Rush when Minka gets back. That's possible too. I think there are creative ways they can do it. We'll see who comes up. Tariq Carpenter or Michael Walker will probably come up. I think Carpenter would be best to fill kind of the Holcomb skill set, where you're kind of this all around guy. He's a former safety, so he can
Hmm.
cover decently well. So he's a guy that kind of has a Holcomish skill set in that regard. Quan has experience working the green dot, not in Pittsburgh, but elsewhere. So I think that's your natural green dot. But I will say I'm just a little worried about, Elandon Roberts getting a little overexposed. I like
Yeah.
what Elandon Roberts is. I think it's a great signing. He was awesome last night, dude. Like, Elandon
Yeah.
Roberts played an awesome game last night, but I just don't. I'm Terrell Austin. I'm looking at this and saying, okay, how do I make sure I keep putting Elandon Roberts and Quan Alexander in positions to succeed without them, getting exposed? Because the Titans never really had, a whole week to go over it and say, we got these two guys and we can do this. And I think the
Hmm.
Steelers did, as the game went on, start to kind of spin Neil down a little bit. So I would imagine that's something they're going to do.
Yep, I mentioned that too when somebody asked on X how I thought they were going to go about replacing Cole Holcomb. A massive loss for this defense, and thoughts to him. It's good that it sounds like he's going to be able to make a full recovery and anything. Very terrible knee injury. So thoughts are with him as well as Traylon Burks on the other side getting injured. Just a couple minutes left in the game. Nick, we're running a little bit over, but I do want to ask you one last thing about this game. Matt Canada's first appearance, coaching from the sidelines coming out of the booth. Very first drive results in an opening drive touchdown. I was like, man, Are we gonna have fireworks tonight? Obviously, the entire game didn't go that way, but how did you feel like the first game with Matt Cannon on the sidelines went for this offense?
I thought it went well. Listen, people are going to be like, "Oh, they only scored 20 points. They didn't get their 400 yards." Folks, if Kenny Pickett had played well the first half, they would have been
Hmm.
near 500 yards potentially. I mean,
Yeah.
he should have scored 30 plus in this game. He called a very good game, in my opinion. There were a few play calls where I was like, "What are you doing?" Like, thank goodness that honestly, thank goodness they got a false start on that Wildcat counter that they ran with
Yeah.
Najee in the goal line. That was a
Hmm.
terrible play call. I don't know what he was
The
thinking.
the screen to George on like second and
Yeah.
whatever when they were in goal. Yeah. But
Yeah, the 2nd and 4 after that Jalen run at
yeah.
midfield, they
Hmm.
run that screen to Pickens and just kills the drive. I thought that was a weird call too. Um, I just I think he's done a nice job of looking at what they haven't done well and looking at what tendencies they haven't leaned into and kind of working off those. I think he's done a nice job of starting to implement some motion at the snap, like Connor Hayward and Jalen Warren both had that yesterday. I thought that was cool. I think he's done a nice job of getting more stacks and bunches, getting guys free releases off the line so they can get open. He's done a nice job of creating havocs for zones. So we've seen more open guys running the past few weeks as a result. I think that's been big. I like what he's done in the run game. I think he's varied up the run game. More pulling guards has been a cool thing. Najee's touchdown, Sayamalo kicked that linebacker right out, man.
Hmm. And that
Like that was
was
awesome to
Aziz,
see.
right? That was Aziz Al Shair, who's a pretty good linebacker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Broderick got rabbed to the second level, kicked out Gibbons, and well, that was that. So I mean, I think he's done a nice job running out of lighter boxes. They're a better shotgun running team. I also thought he did a nice job under center in this game, where when they did go under center, I thought they actually started to lean into more passing plays. We saw some play action out of those looks. I think they went under center something like 17 times maybe in this game. And if I remember correctly, they passed the ball at least 5 of those, which is again, that's like enough when that happens. Like you naturally
Hmm.
like naturally under center, you're gonna run more than you pass. It's every team in the league usually does that, but I feel like they did a
Hmm.
nice job breaking tendency. And I think the ability for Canada, it wasn't to talk to Kenny. It was to talk to Najee and Deontay and George and the offensive line, these other guys about what they were seeing and what they kind of liked better. I thought that has really helped. So I'm not sure that they're like magically fixed or anything, but I'll tell you what, man,
No.
last
Yeah.
2 games, last 2 games, I think has been the best called games of the season, certainly, and maybe the best called games of Matt Cannon's entire tenure. He has done a nice job the last 2 weeks of trying to identify their weaknesses and switching it up. The passing game is just so much more varied than it was. And I like that they're running out of lighter boxes. He's getting them into lighter boxes and kind of looks out of those lighter boxes. I think the Rams were really the first game where he started to do that. And obviously, they ran very well against the Rams in the second half. And I thought that was a big key to that game. I didn't think he did that as well against the Jaguars. I thought that they kind of started to stack it a little bit, and he was more focused on the passing game. But this game felt like where he kind of mashed it all together, and I thought it looked good. Now, I guess it's going to be how do you respond when DC start to get that on you, right? Because
Yeah.
what happens in Canada is he finds something that works and they spams it into oblivion, and then it doesn't work anymore. And so
Hmm.
I think he's got to work against that. But credit to him, man. I mean, he's
Yeah.
been
I agree.
all the chance and everything that go his way, all the vitriol. But he hasn't done a good job this year. But these last 2 games, I think he has not been the problem. I think execution has
Was
largely been the problem when they have struggled. The quarterback has not played well the past 2 weeks, whether that's been Mitch or Kenny, and so he needs to get better quarterback play. But I think if that ever comes and Kenny gets a little bit more consistency, I think the offense can be better as long as Canada keeps this up. It's now, can Canada keep this up? With how this offense is going, right? Pickett will hit a hot streak and Canada will somehow revert back into being, what he was before from Rams to San Francisco.
Yeah, and with Canada being on the sidelines, they had Glenn Thomas kind of taking that, I guess, role-ish in the booth. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but um, yeah, did you think that that played a role in the offense as well, just having like another voice maybe within that?
Yeah. I think it's nice to have another voice in there. Now, I'll say this. I don't think this is some sweeping change. Like Glenn Thomas
Mhm.
ain't gonna be the next OC, guys. I'm just saying. Next OC ain't on this staff. I'm guaranteeing you that. Like this isn't a situation where Randy goes and Matt Canada's coming along. Like nah. What they're just doing is trying to okay. Kenny, here's what I saw from the top view, because Matt's going to be
Right.
focusing with Najee and Jalen. Like you saw, Ed Thompson, our photographer for Steelers now, took a lot of photos of where Canada was, and I don't think I saw one photo of him sitting with Kenny the entire time. I think I saw him with Rudolph once because Rudolph is kind of your clipboard guy that does a little of his scouting and all of that.
Mhm.
Najee and Jalen, Deontay, George, and Allen. Like he's talking with the rest of the guys. So Thomas is just kind of being there and with Sullivan and him and saying, okay, this is what we're seeing from a quarterback perspective. I'm sure Canada can obviously always talk to Kenny if he needs to, but I don't think that's really what it was. So it's just
Yeah.
streamlining the process. I think it's allowing Canada to dive into the entire offense. I think it was a little too Kenny centric before. I'll say that. I feel like, before, I think one of the underrated talking points when they were putting guys in bad spots to succeed was I always felt like he was trying to accentuate Kenny while it sometimes went at the detriment of others. And so I think now they're starting to kind of work that out, wade the waters a little bit. And it's going to maybe be a process where Kenny has to get a little bit out of his comfort zone, but that's going to be for the betterment of the offense.
I agree. Okay. Well, a lot of good stuff there. Nick, tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, guys, you can follow me on X, Twitter, whatever you may want to call it, at Farabot FB. Read stuff at SteelersNow.com. Of course, subscribe to the Steelers Now channel as well.
There you go. I am Zachary Smith, PGH. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Leave us a comment down below how you feel about any of the things that we talked about. And yeah, if you're listening somewhere else, be sure to leave us a 5-star review over there. Until next time, have a great weekend. Alan and I should be back on Monday. Alan and I haven't done a show together since Wednesday now. Him and Carter did a great job yesterday, Nick and I today. So 4 different faces on your screen within the last 48 hours. But we'll see you guys on Monday. Have a great weekend. Till then, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers afternoon drive.